So this is episode number 7 of the Thinking Hat, and we have usual suspects, Chaturanga, Dumi, myself, and we have two new guests with us as well. We have Manila and we have Sandhu. So welcome everyone. So like I said, the topic this time is going to be about how different things will be in a post-corona world. In terms of okay, so we are going to break it down to two parts, and the first part is going to be how different it's going to be in terms of economy around the world and in Sri Lanka, and in how different certain jobs are going to be as well. And soon after, we'll be talking about how this will affect people and how different, I guess, relationships will be after after we lift curfew and after we come out of this. Right. Right. So before we get started on the main topic, I had this burning question that I wanted to ask Chaturanga specifically, but I mean everyone else can weigh in as well. So WHO, right? Like, what the fuck? Seriously, like, aren't they? I mean, they have one job, right? Aren't they like supposed to? Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, right? I might be like absolutely way off, but in my opinion, at the moment, they have one fucking job, and that's basically to stop a pandemic from spreading across the world, right? So my question to Chaturang first is, why were they unable to prevent the pandemic from spreading across the world? Because I mean, they aren't they being funded by the millions by different countries? I mean, they are, right? Chaturang, would you like to, like, am I way off to say that, or like, what do you?
So there are two parts to that. They are mainly not funded by the whole world. They are mainly funded by three different USA, China, and the Gates Foundation. They are the three main contributors to the WHO. There are obviously when there is a pandemic or something like this happening, like the latest that we can go to is Ebola, and the WHO, as per the information that's available, fucked it up right royally as well. So you can't necessarily tell. So this is just one organization. I mean, there are two sides to it. As I said earlier, it can be that the WHO is unable to sort of. We can't say whether they are unable to control it at the moment, but they are definitely holding on to information. That's for sure. Because if you take a look at whatever is available, if you sort of sit and read all the information that has been made available to us throughout the days, it's clear that a lot of people, apart from the WHO, were clear on certain things. Like, for example, in early December, when they said this will go through from humans to humans, people knew about it. But the WHO didn't make a fuss, like, they didn't confirm it, like, because everyone is depending on the WHO facts. And then now there's, like, the recent one was whether the virus was airborne. And again, the WHO didn't confirm it, and now they have no choice but to say it is, because science has proved that it is. So, and then comes the second part of it. Now, let's come to Sri Lanka. Let's take a look at our example, where people, we still find people who are not talking to the authorities and hiding the fact that they're sick, or not talking to the authorities and not telling them that they've come from overseas. So, this could be the situation. Blame the WHO just because they can't tell the accurate numbers. Because if you take a look at the details that are available online, as soon as the coronavirus broke out and became came to the epidemic level, people started making meters and saying, okay, this is the worldometer, this is the John Hopkins University meter, this is what the New York Times did, and they had all interactive data that people could access. But now, if you go to each of these, there is at least 100,000 to 50,000 difference in each country. So how do they sort of accumulate? To say, you only say the WHO is messing it up, but if you take a look at the track record, yes, you can say that, because they did the same with the Ebola virus. But there is also the other side where people are responding differently to this situation. So it's really up to the people to think whatever, but the main important thing right now is to sort of do your part and not
Yeah, I
whatever
think
the rest. I mean,
the whole point of the WHO or World Health Organization to exist is to have a global authority to govern or help rather each individual state to in their healthcare and research and stuff like this basically. But I think for us, the dependency on organizations like WHO has risen with the whole these crises that we have not given much thought to their own healthcare systems. But to be honest, from what I gather and my perspective, is that the countries like South Korea, the countries like Sri Lanka also, and China, I mean, surprisingly, China has gotten rid of this pandemic, and they don't have new cases from where it originated. And these countries used to be the highest number in terms of new cases every single day. So it's basically going back to the roots when this kind of global crisis happens, and then just believing in who you elected on. I don't know. I don't know what everyone else's opinion on this matter is, but I mean, the government officials are getting paid for a reason, and then they are to do their job. And if they are doing their job correctly, yes, we don't have to rely on WHO just for research purposes. Yes, but in terms of jurisdiction of healthcare inside another country or sovereignty is not something that they should be looking at. I don't know. That's my opinion.
I agree with Dumi on that. I mean, I wouldn't say agree 100%, but I think, WHO and international organizations and the authority they have over like a particular issue kind of stops at your national border, right? I mean, the whole idea of anarchy and not having like a overarching authority at the global level is something that's kind of underlying the whole international system in the world if you look at it, right? So I don't think WHO or the UN or any other organization has the authority to govern a country, right? What they could perhaps do is, okay, we would give you a kind of guidelines or like, international best practices, a kind of like suggestions on how to handle this issue. But the WHO or nobody, I mean, nobody can actually come inside a country and say, okay, no, this is how we're going to do it. It actually boils down to what the government is willing to do, how far the government is going to go in terms of implementing different policies, and how far the government is actually willing to take a risk. I mean, if you look at this from like a political aspect, like people are looking at what their government is doing, how the leaders are kind of responding to this issue, and that is actually going to define how like the future of these administrations. Like for an example, people are looking at what Trump is doing, and the fact that he's calling this like Chinese virus or the Wuhan virus is not going to help him to stay in office in the long run if he actually wants to. So there's so much the WHO can do, but in terms of like implementing policies and actions at the ground level, there's nothing much they can do. It actually boils down to how effective the government structures are, how effective the administration is, and how how willing governments are to implement actions. It's easy for China to do something like this. It's easy for Sri Lanka to do it. We're a small country. And just geography-wise, we're quite small. I mean, it's easy for a government to do it. And like the regime that we have in office right now, they just how long are they into office? Like what, 4 months into office? They don't have to worry about getting re-elected within like what, 1 or 2 years. It's easy for them to for the president to implement this kind of policies to lock down the country, to impose a curfew. It's easy for China to do it because who's going to come up and question the Communist Party policies? Literally no one. I mean, what's the cost of questioning it? You're just going to pay with your life, right? Nobody wants to do it. I mean, there are people who's like, voicing their opinions, but I mean, are you willing to pay the price of questioning the Central Communist Party?
I agree. I agree. Nobody would go against that, and I think Sadhu had opinion on this.
Yes, but I think we need to look at this in two different levels, sort of national wise and internationally. I think, well, there's this whole, even in the Middle Ages, when people couldn't sort of, use airplanes or sort of ships to go to other areas as easily, the Black Death spread. So I think more than just closing borders and being closed, I think this is a time to be more open, sort of share the data, share the information, so that if one country is a victim, the next countries are sort of ready for it. And so we need global cooperation at this point, because there are countries, the richer countries, who can sort of produce more medical equipment, and this needs to be distributed equally. Otherwise, the poorer countries who might not have the resources might not get access to those sort of resources, and it could end up sort of monopolizing the medical equipments in the richer areas. So we need to really avoid that, which needs global cooperation. So if we just close down our borders and sort of just trust our government, it's not always going to work, because even in the Middle Ages, it still spread. So everyone, it's like climate action. So if only one country thinks about the climate and the other countries don't, it's not going to work. I think it needs a lot of sort of global communication and sort of trust in each of the national sort of nations as well, between the nations. And coming back to the WHO, like in the US has always been sort of a global leader in terms of when it was the financial crisis in 2008. And even Ebola, and they had already like always sort of taken the role of global cooperation, but lately it's always been sort of me first, and sort of looking inwards into your own nation instead of actually trying to do something to cooperate the whole world together. And that has also taken our trust away. All the other nations aren't going to trust the US as much, I think. So it's the lack of
This is my main concern, right? Dumi, sorry, did you want to add something?
No, yeah. So I'm with Sandhu and Manala on this as well. Given the whole scenario, I think Westerners. I mean, I think Sandhu is in UK, so you would know, and both of y'all are in the European Union, so except for Brexit. So knowing that the Westerners are quite reluctant in a way, I wouldn't say that's a bad thing, but they are reluctant in a way that to govern over their own citizens, saying that okay, this is what you're supposed to do, and then stay indoors. I think I saw some of the Italian governors of regions coming out on video and saying that, look here, and using profanity and saying, if you are not staying indoors, this is what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to shoot you, kind of thing. That's a warning and a threat also, which goes to say that there's sometimes too much independence is also harmful. So too much democracy is sometimes harmful as well. Surprisingly, Switzerland doesn't think so, but hopefully, yeah.
I think the sort of negative impact on sort of democracy had come from the sort of irresponsible behavior of politicians in the past. They have sort of taken away the trust, and they have sort of mistreated and used information wrongly. So now this is like coming back. So now people are not going to trust in the government, not going to trust in what politicians say. So they are just going to do whatever they want. And I think it's because they misuse the trust in the government.
Yeah. So this is my main concern, right? So it's my opinion that there's going to be something else that's down the line, can be way down the line, but I have an idea that there might be something that's even worse than, there might be another disease that's even worse than corona down the line. So my concern is how is the world gonna prepare for that? And like,
by the way, adding it again, Surit has a shelter, so you can go and use Surit's shelter if you are in Sri Lanka.
this guy,
Anyone
this
around
guy,
Battara area,
like
yeah.
every single time. What's up with that doing? Anyway,
Should I invite කරපන් මේ shelter එකට වාරාගේ.
वो shelter का तो पान कोने मचा.
Anyway, so yeah.
Right. So
You say.
that's my main concern, right? Because like, I mean, let's say 50 years down the line, maybe 20 years down the line, whatever it is, maybe even 2 years down the line, there's definitely going to be another disease that, that's almost or even deadlier than corona, right? My question is, so like obviously royally fucked it up this time, the whole world. And I think I'm not saying the entire blame should go to WHO, but I mean, seeing that they withheld some information, I mean, they are to blame as well, right? So my question is like, how will we mitigate a similar situation in the future? Like, what steps can we take? What have we learned so far from what we are facing at the moment, and what can we do better? So I'll ask Chaturanga first. Chaturanga, what do you think?
Okay, so that's a rather tricky question. Now, to look at that again, what we can do right now is to look at the past. No, we can't. I mean, I can't predict what's going to happen because.
No, just your opinion, Masan. That's yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to draw an example from the past.
It's twofold. I think one is how do we prevent it? That's one thing. The second thing is if we are so unlucky that we will get a global epidemic going on, how do we respond to it? That's the two main questions that we need to answer.
So every time these things happen, we're taking a look at a time when these things happen. It's a time where the medical industry sort of takes a leap forward because like there is a concentration of the whole medical field working on similar things at the same time. Whereas in a normal situation, there would be one person would be looking at a higher dose of some medicine that is already existing. Someone would be looking at some other disease. A lot of people will be working on various things. Now, when something like this happens, what happens is people sort of focus their attention onto this main problem and sort of realize, okay, this is what happened. In another 365 days from this point, or at least 2 years, we can safely say that there will be a proper forensic of how the coronavirus happened. Now we have theories. We say, it was a military thing and, China attack and US attack and all sorts of things. But in another 1 to 2 years, or even maybe less, we will definitely have a forensic sort of a report on how this happened. When the availability of that is known, we can then know that, now they know what the hell happened. So they know how to also prevent it in the future because definitely because the world can't function like this. People will have a fear to go to their workplaces. There will be unemployment and all sorts of nonsense. So the conglomerates, the bigger companies in the world will fund in and somehow find a cure. They can't afford not to because the people will not go to work. So as a result of both those things, as you say, the ability for another virus to happen in the near future, at least in the next 50 years, solely because we as a people, even though we try to be
and there goes Shatrang. So where were we doing? What were we talking about again?
I think until Chaturanga is back, we can go with for both of you all. So both of you all, one thing, how do we prevent something like this happening? If the given chance that we are so unlucky that this happens, how do we go about it?
I think those two questions would be the sort of main stage within the sort of way how governments react as well. So like, for example, right now, they've been using sort of surveillance and their power to sort of use surveillance on people to predict population movements. and they've sort of been tweaking it in an ad hoc way to sort of gain more power. So, for example, even in France, I think they tabled laws, like they tried to change the way how telecom networks were working, and they wanted to give the authorization for them to collect data from people's locations and medical records. And also, if this goes on forever, like for long, they can sort of start getting data information from biomedical devices, sort of predicting people's temperature to sort of inside the body as well. So this is a lot of data, and the government, if the government sort of monopolizes all this data, it might not be as positive for us, the people, in the future. So the governments are right now, okay, it's fine. It's a big nod, and they're gonna go along with it because it's a state of emergency. But what happens after Corona? They're gonna keep using the same power over surveillance, or could they say, oh yeah, there could be another pandemic, so we are gonna keep using the same surveillance? So it's about sort of the necessities, and it all depends on, like, I think the politics and the economy, everything's gonna sort of depend on how the governments face those two questions as well.
So I mean, it's not going to be unlikely that this is not going to happen. It's going to happen. Not. We had SARS, we had MERS, and there've been so many. It's not just intelligence report, but I mean, if you look at all these all these medical journals and all scientific research, there's been claims of something like SARS or MERS, but something more deadlier than both these diseases taking place. It's just that all these, I don't know if it actually went unnoticed or if anybody didn't really pay any attention to it. I just don't know what really happened there. But the thing is, it's not unprecedented. We knew it's gonna happen. We knew it's coming. It's just that we didn't quite. I'll say that we didn't really know when it's gonna happen, but it was long coming. It was in the pipeline. People saw this coming. You just can't say it's unprecedented. I'm not going to agree with.
So in terms of economical side of things, or I mean, just saying financially, if we knew that it was coming, why didn't we prepare, or why didn't governments prepare?
I suppose we weren't expecting it to be this deadly, right? Because I mean, if you look at SARS and MERS, it was mostly concentrated in Asia, just one part of the world. Or if you look at Ebola, it was just in Western Africa, right? It was not global like this. It wasn't so large scale. So perhaps the intuition was that, okay, we will have something, but it's not going to be so great that the entire world is going to collapse at the same time. Or the whole system is going to collapse at the same time. It's just that, I mean, if you look at historically, most of the predictions we have today, or how we kind of understand things based on what happened previously, right? So intuition of just this, like another disease being concentrated to a particular kind of the world, like a region of the world, is, I mean, that's something that that's acceptable. But I suppose what we didn't focus on, given like the kind of the globalization and how interconnected we are, given the scale of how like international travel has kind of grown over time, we didn't really take into account how this could kind of impact different regions of the world, and how it could impact like different age groups or different demographic sectors. Perhaps we didn't pay much attention to that, but I wouldn't agree that this was unprecedented. We saw this coming. Just that.
So I think part of the reason that most of us couldn't actually prepare ourselves was because certain important information was withheld, right, by these organizations and by these countries that were affected by the pandemic. And obviously, if we had those vital information before, certain companies, all of us would have definitely, prepared for this.
Yeah, but I think when I said about prevention and also about the unlikely situation that this occurs again, what I meant was that, okay, so see, everyone was scared of what's going to happen when the World War was going on. Then the companies had contingencies in place, right? Because we knew that this world is going. I mean, basically both world wars, Germany was going crazy, uh, but still the fourth largest army in the world. So in terms of that, we were prepared because that was going on for years. Now the whole thing about not having contingencies in place is what I was saying about like the actual impact. So see, it doesn't matter how much of, from honestly, on my opinion, it doesn't matter how much of medical research that you do, you can't ever prepare for a epidemic like this. And that's what I think. I mean, I understand Manila's point that this was long time coming, but in terms of a global catastrophe, yes, this is long time. Like it was bound to happen. But in terms of this particular disease, I don't think anyone could predict that this particular disease would take over, like Ebola, like AIDS, like the Spanish flu in 1918, any of those things. But what I'm saying is that yes, you get the profits or you get the whole your balance sheet of a country going strong. Have at least some portion of it stored away or stored in bonds or whatever it is that you can store it on. I don't know. It's up to the government to do it or not. It's up to the government whether it's developing nation or it's a developing nation. It depends on a lot of economic factors as a whole. But have
So, Manila, you disagree.
yes.
No,
I mean, this is,
I'm just, it's difficult, I would say. I mean, if you look at Sri Lanka, look at the taxpayers. What's the percentage of Sri Lankans paying taxes? Right?
yeah.
I mean,
No, yes. I mean, it's not about. See, that's what I'm saying. It's not about one particular country, and it's not about. I'm not talking about just US or just UK or Europe or
if you look
Asia.
at Europe, the interest rates are negative. How are you gonna do it? It's
Exactly. So this is what it's. It's not. What I'm saying is not in terms of how it is now, but what I'm saying is we've gone through, this world as a whole has gone through so many global crises in the past and the recent years. Why can't we establish ourselves something like this so that in the future this is something that is preventive, at least the economic impact? That's what I'm saying.
I think like all this time we've been sort of running the countries with a focus on the economy and how well we're doing. And for example, take the US. But if you take the legislations and sort of laws regarding sick pay leave, that's a fail. Like they don't actually have in many states sick pay, something as basic as that. So which means that a
they
person
don't have free healthcare.
Yes, exactly. See, so that's, I think the shift globally should sort of change. I think in a way, sort of laws and legislations sort of keep the focus on sort of independent or people's health and going back to the basics, not just the economy. And so that's how we could prevent or sort of keep the focus within the people at all times in health. And so we should definitely encourage people to live a healthier life. And I mean, even in the UK, the NHS was sort of, it was known for so many years as something achieved, like a great achievement. But in the past few years, it's been going down. Still, yeah. I think legislations and laws and governments should keep health as the focus.
Right.
Generally.
So I guess let's slowly move into our main topic now. Right. So basically, I mean, even when I asked the previous question, right? So we gave our 2 cents. Each of us we gave our 2 cents on like how certain organizations are going to adapt to this situation, or
I get three.
Shatrang has given 2 cents.
Your mouth is proud of you. Yes.
I thought you gave 50 cents. You are wearing that hat like a rapper. Anyway, so I mean, now at the moment in Sri Lanka, I see a lot of different companies handing out and promoting the growth of plants in our own homes, right? There are so many companies coming up, and I guess the agriculture department is working overtime as well. Handing out different plants and seeds, well, so that we could grow plants in our own homes. So now, do you think, at least for a certain period of time, we will kind of, go back to the whole agrarian way of life? I mean, I don't mean the entire world, obviously, right? But do you think like this is going to make a certain change in terms of like how we will adapt to another pandemic? Let's say if it were to happen, do me?
Or at least in I mean, how we come out of this whole situation. Is that what you're asking? Yeah.
Yeah, no, what I'm asking is now that's a certain okay. So now basically these companies giving out these seeds and plants to our homes and basically promoting us growing our own plants here in our homes is something that I've noticed. So my question is, since this is happening, do you think this is something people will continue anyway and be prepared for another, let's say, a disease, or do you think people will just forget in a couple of days, or what do you think?
You are asking whether we are going to Sirima Bandaranaike era or not? No.
After about the end of April, we'll go back to work. Masang ito to Palawan police.
That's exactly what I want to know.
But I wanted to say something about what Dumi brought about the funds and all of that, and what Manila said about how we are look at our tax base in Sri Lanka and around the world and even in the European region where we are at negative levels. But as soon as this damn thing happened, we made a fund. We have a fund right now, right? Social Security and Health Fund, presidential something. We have it in Sri Lanka. We have it in the SAARC region. And the world is also having a fund right now. This is supposedly money that was, we are heading into a recession. 2020 was supposed to be this economic, very scary year. And then as a country also, because we had that, the debt problem. And then all of a sudden we have, Akbar brothers giving 50 million and, all the businessmen coming in. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you really put your heart and soul and you think, okay, this is it, maybe people will still, I mean, we remember what happened after the tsunami. The tsunami funds came in and all of a sudden the money disappeared. Then, all sorts of things happen. But maybe those things will happen. I mean,
white van.
Yeah, I mean, but my point is, if we can do it, we should be, I mean, we can do it. We've done it now. When there is are we doing this because we probably don't have money, to be honest. I mean, we are a country where we don't have money, but all of a sudden we took steps to ease the foreign exchange control. We asked people to deposit whatever the hell you have outside, deposit it here. Today we issued a gazette saying don't send out foreign investments, don't do foreign investments, and we are taking a lot of initiatives in Sri Lanka. Whether people will bring in black money, whether they will be questioned, those are, yes, problems, but those will be problems for later. But at the moment, I mean, if we want to make a fund, we can.
Okay, but my point is, it's a short-term solution. It's not a long-term sustainable solution. I mean, okay, right, you have a fund now. You're channeling all possible, whatever you can scrap off and direct it to this fund, you are doing it, right? But how long are you going to keep on doing this for? Can you do it in
I think this is
5 months down the line?
I think this is steering towards why the IMF and the World Bank and all of that exists, which I don't want to go into right now.
No, I don't think it is. No, what I'm saying is, okay, fine, there's some kind of a fund, there's some kind of money being channeled into short-term efforts, right? But I don't agree with this being, a long-term sustainable solution. It's not. You can't do it.
Agreed. I mean, having a fund, just because you have a fund doesn't mean that you can prevent anything from happening in the future. I mean, if there's an asteroid attack to whatever the bank that you have your money in, well, sorry to say that you don't have any money anymore. But yeah, so I think
I think it also sort of comes down to how people trust these institutions, right? I mean, honestly, what's our track record of being transparent?
I mean, in terms of any political movement, there is zero transparency. Anyway,
So
Yeah.
if the people are not trusting the system, the institution, what guarantee do you have that people will actually bring in this put in this money? I mean, you see most of these private companies going out on their own and doing things.
Yeah,
Why?
exactly. Yeah, and why do they have to? In terms of, I mean, we have about 1.5 million charities in the world. 1.5 million charity organizations in the world, not money. And why can't they step up and do something? It's the same thing. Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of organizations are doing whatever they can within their own capacity instead of joining hands with governments. But then it actually boils down to how much you trust the system to hold hands with the system. So it's just I mean it's a different problem. It's a different issue. It's like a whole issue on its own. So
yeah. So I think this is an issue that we should discuss in 2025 when we are all out of this whole mess.
you
No, but the problem is the private companies at the moment can't do anything because they have their work problems. I mean, the current situation in terms of the government sector in Sri Lanka, they are gone. They are cutting down payments. They are reducing their internships. They are cutting down the executives. All sorts of nonsense happening. And why can't I don't agree fully with the fact Dumi brought up this whole fund nonsense, but I'm going to stick with the point for the time being because why can't we make a fund for emergency issues like this? We have to have because leave aside the fact that okay, there could be another corona, SARS or MERS or whatever. There could be other issues. We are an island. Think about that. We have an aging population in our country where the aging population is less than the new workforce in the country. We have so many issues going on. We have to seriously consider a mechanism to fund it. We have the EPF right now. EPF works just fine. People steal off the EPF. I mean, we still don't stop paying EPF. It's a system. Yeah, there will be issues when something is introduced. People will shout about it. But if the government seriously wants it, we have seen the governments doing stuff in the past. I mean, for example, for the previous government, when the right to information was brought in, people were saying all sorts of things. But it was brought in, and people are taking advantage of it right now. I know I am because that is the job I do. But if the government wants to, I mean, they did it right now. They set up this whatever the fund that is they set up. They did it now, and people are. I mean, in my area where I live, the senior citizens, their payment went up from 2,000 to 5,000, 3,000 rupee increase, which is a lot from the society that I live in. So, I mean, if the government really wants it, they can do it, and there will be a backlash, and the government should be able to handle it. And whoever is having the backlash has to have, proper reasons as to why they're having backlash. That is just my point. But I don't agree completely with the fact that there should be the answer to all problems in Sri Lanka is setting up a fund. That is not what I'm saying right here. All I'm saying is we should have some sort of financial backing because otherwise what will happen is, thank God we had all of these hospitals built. I mean, Suddharabin Siddhanda and to all the previous governments, we had these hospitals. What was except for what MR and Maitripala built for the past so many years, how many hospital renovations have we done? I mean, you can probably count it with your hands. That's the type of attention that we have paid to our healthcare. Our former health minister was the vice president of the WHO, if I'm not mistaken. He was like a serious position.
So basically, what you're saying is we need to establish some sort of a emergency fund, right?
Definitely.
So what will it be for specifically? Like, it'll be abroad.
It could be an alien attack.
No, it's disaster management, basically, DM. That's what Red Cross and everyone does. So yeah.
Right. Good. So since you said that like a lot of government sector employers have sort of lost their jobs, right? Now, if we look at the private sector for a minute, now basically now a lot of
Garment sector, not government. Garment. Edung.
right. Okay. Right. So now, if you look at the private sector, right? So now a lot of us are like working from home. Do you think like a lot of companies have realized like, okay, now this is actually a very cost-effective method, and do you think a lot of companies are seeing the advantage of people working from home? Or do you think how
This is not a cost-effective method for the simple thing being. Firstly, now Sri Lanka is a very what do I call it? It's the private sector in our country has a way of operating, and it's not too different from the state apparatus as a whole. I mean, it's not like the private sector is completely liberal. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just that we like to call ourselves the private sector. I mean, we work the same set of hours, but if we are told to work more, we work more. The only difference is we don't have like sort of trade unions and shit like that going on for us, right? So, in terms of the mental health, in terms of even boil it down, like, okay, leave aside these big topics, even to the simple internet that we have now, is more money that is added to it. That means then in that case, it's not a cost effective way to, like, what we are doing right now, we're doing this because we are at home, right? I mean, if not, we would have met somewhere and done it. So this internet cost, the opportunity cost, the time that we are spending here, all of this has to be taken into account. And if you take a look at a whole, what gets cut from the office in terms of what is being done at a location called office is being spent at another location called home. Electricity bill, internet cost, food, water, everything, right? So if you take a look at that, මගේ අතේ තියෙන සල්ලි ප්‍රමාණය disposable cash එකට යනවා. That's at the end of the day, that's what's happening. So if you get paid 30,000 and if you spend 25,000 for whatever you did throughout the month and had 5,000 rupees savings, that's going to go for a 6 now if we continue this. So you're going to pull into your savings also. And at the end, if we continue this now, this is like we're going like on the 12th, 15th day, yeah, somewhere around that. So by the time we end the month, and then we go to that 14th. Fourth week, right? Okay, month. So when we go into when you get the money into your hand, you will realize that you have spent more than you spent in the other months. It's obvious that you like spend on bulk vegetables, bulk food, everything. You buy bulk of everything. And then you also spend for your internet and your electricity bill. I mean, my AC is on like 24/7 now. I think right, I know how I'm going to pay for that shit.
That's for the employees. So now, what about the employers? Isn't it cost effective for them?
No, it's not. It's not in that sense. I think I can add my 2 cents or 1 cent in that. So working for a digital company, I can guarantee you that the productivity has gone down because you're not as productive as you would be at office. The reason being, in terms of our industry, there's a lot of learning, peer-to-peer learning also while you're doing work, right? So that makes you productive because half the time, about 80% of your time you spend on actually working, and 20% of your time you actually spend on learning. And that in total, if you add up the hours and at the end of the year, you basically brought up a better employee than the year, like at the start of the year. So in terms of a company as a whole, we would never recommend having basically work from home for a long period of time. Yes, since it's IT companies, there are policies that you can work from home. You can request to work from home if you are sick and all that. That is all understood. But at the long run, it's not, as Chaturanga said, and I completely agree, it's not mentally healthy to do that because humans, no matter how much of an introvert we are, and I know a couple of introverts myself, Mandala, you can pitch in. But how much of an introvert we are doesn't matter. as long as we need to have human contact, we are humans in the day, so we have to have a human contact. That's how some of our endorphins are released. So it's not healthy for anyone to be, staying at home and looking at our parents' faces for a long period of time.
No, I mean, you're right, absolutely. So, I mean, we are tribal creatures after all, right? And we do better when we are together, right? We are more productive when we work together. So yeah, Manila, you were about to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something there. I mean, I still work for a company, for an organization rather, and I work from here, from remotely, and I'm still doing work for Sri Lanka. So, and I've actually been working remotely for quite a long time, and I think it kind of comes down to the organizational structure of your employer, right? Luckily for me, my organization supports remote work. We have provisions in place to ensure, that we kind of adhere to a particular kind of a working environment, and it's something that I'm comfortable with because it gives me the flexibility to work, manage my workload, and also balance my studies and my work. And it's not just me. This, I think, major part of the workforce in my organization works remotely. We don't really have to go to a physical workplace to do our work. So it actually boils down to the kind of the working environment and the configuration of your organization. I don't think that's something most companies in Sri Lanka is kind of comfortable working with, because I mean, as Chaturanga said, we have a kind of an idea of a workplace, what a job should be like. Right? So you go to work at 9 o'clock, come home by like 5 o'clock. You just have this 9 to 5 idea of doing work. I think for most countries, especially in Finland, Finland has a very flexible working environment, and this whole 9 to 5 desk job thing concept doesn't actually exist here.
Is that true that you have the 4-day work week and not 5 days?
That was like this, this whole big fake news agenda of trying to portray a new prime minister as, millennial, trying to cut down the work week. No, that's not true. And actually, she didn't even say that. So that's sure. No, but actually, Finland has a lot of options in place to ensure that you don't really need to physically walk into your office to do your work. It boils down to labor laws of a country, how the industries have evolved over time, how organizations are actually structured. So I think Sri Lanka has a long way to go in terms of making sure that the way we approach work is different. There are so many organizations within the country, private sector organizations, who, I mean, pretty much function like the public sector. You go to work at 9 o'clock, and then you take your tea break, and then you work for a couple of hours, and then you go for your lunch break, and you take like another 1 hour, and then by 3:45 you're done because you're getting ready to go home by 4:30. I mean, in an environment like that, working from home doesn't work, right? But a lot of countries actually have moved away from that 9 to 5 working culture. So in that sense, where you work from actually doesn't matter. But Sri Lanka has a long way to go until you get to that point of, it's your work that matters, the quality of your work that matters, and not where you work from. That's something that, it's going to take some time for Sri Lanka to reach that point. But so because of that, maybe working from home is not very profitable or efficient or, I don't know, effective. But after you probably reach that point, it doesn't really make much of a difference where you work from.
So in terms of the loss that these, sorry, Sandhu, go ahead. Yeah.
No, yeah, I totally agree with Manila, because working from home has its advantages as well in terms of increasing equality in parenting, and which causes in, if we don't have that. There's a gender inequality set there. So it has a lot of themes and advantages going there, but it's just to support that the government and the society should be ready in terms of the mentality about it, the attitude about it, and also the laws set in place. And like Surit said earlier about the whole planting at home, I think the gist of it is that we've learned to live with the essentials for now, sort of do what has to be done, and sort of a disaster management way. But also, for example, we had this whole culture of traveling, and with Instagram influencers, traveling is the new thing, and it almost felt like a must, and that's the new thing. But which sort of sets effect on climate change and the airplanes and how much traveling is done in the world, even though you have access to everything you need to live just around your house. So, but I think something that could change from this is that we'd learn positively, we'd learn to live with the essentials and not sort of get thrown off by your these sort of consumerist needs that allows you to consume more and do more for yourself than you need to actually. So it could be a twist, or we could just go back into a huge party after Corona and just go back to old ways. It's a possibility.
It's
Yeah, I
just
think
interesting
that's
that you
also
mentioned that, because that actually ties into a second topic, which I'll bring up in a moment. But sorry, Amanda, you were saying.
No, I think I mean, personally, for me, this whole I've been in isolation since the 12th of last month, so it's almost a month now, and it has kind of made me realize how much I consume / spend unnecessarily, and
That
it has
that overpriced coffee.
well, I don't go for coffee. I mean, I don't get coffee here as much as I did back in Sri Lanka. I just don't like the coffee here, sadly. But that made me realize how much you spend on unnecessary things. Like, you're just random going and getting a milkshake from somewhere, or just eating at a fancy restaurant just so that you can feed your Instagram feed, or just showcast what you've been up to the rest of the world. It has really kind of made you realize how many unnecessary things you're doing. It's
Yeah.
just
So
it's
yeah, I mean, I had this very bad habit of usually after I had my dinner, I used to order something from Uber Eats almost every day, if not once in 2 days at least. And obviously I've realized that it was just all bullshit, right? I mean, you can survive without it. Anyone can. So one of the many things that I've realized that I can do without. So now, in terms of how certain companies are going to recover from the loss that they are incurring right now, how do you think they will manage to do that? And do you think obviously certain companies are going to shut down, right? And so let me bring this question to you. So how do you think companies will recover from this situation that they are facing at the moment?
That's a tricky question, because I think the company to company, that will be different. Whether it's a company in what industry, whether it's doing well, whether it did well, whether their bottom line last year was good. But in terms of the general mindset of everyone, all the companies around Sri Lanka, it has been that, which is the largest, the payroll is the largest cost for a company. Honestly, I don't agree, but I think employees are willing to take the gamble and then say, okay, look, it's fine, we can take a hit. Especially, as Chaturanga said, the garment industry has taken a major hit, so there's no one we can export to, because nobody's gonna buy Nike, apparel, just because there's a pandemic. So having said that, that's the wrong approach.
Unless they do Nike masks, right? Nike masks.
They do, but
sanitizers.
Yeah, they do, but that's about $180 per mask. I don't think that will work. But what I'm saying is, we will come out of it eventually, and it will take at least half a year to come out of it. But cutting down on payroll is not the way to go. I think the way that we all would benefit is reducing the competition that we have among companies for the same industry. What I mean by that is that having a trade monopoly. I know, Manila, you are excited about this, but no, I know, but it's one way that you can look at it. First, it's for a grace period. I'm not saying that it's something sustainable and it's something that we should do for a long period of time. But as we all said, we've all going through a global crisis, and just because global crises are going on doesn't mean that people should take a hit. Yes, the management should take the major hit. Agreed, all valid points, and all the go-tos of every company in the world right now. That's what we've been taught for in business school. But in terms of my 2 cents is reduce the competition, get back in, increase our production, and then get into the whole competition part of things. I don't know. Up to you.
So both Manuela and Chaturanga have the individual inputs, I say, but I'll start with Manuela. Yeah, Manuela, you were.
I'm not in favor of market monopolies. It's not. Maybe for a company it might be beneficial, but there are two parties to a transaction, and it's gonna hit the consumer in a way that you will not be able to recover from. It's not good, right? So I mean, the basic of monopoly is that you're the sole supplier. And you basically,
I'm saying in terms of the Sri Lankan context where the government can implement price policies and all that. Just clarifying.
Price controls are not going to help you, right? Having a price ceiling is not a viable solution in the long run. It's actually adding more to your cost of living if you have a price ceiling. If you bring in competition, there's more firms fighting to supply one thing, and the market forces will kind of reduce the price. I mean, I'm very neoliberal. Let's just keep that part of it out of the equation for now. But, getting more, I mean, you just have one firm, you have a price ceiling, it's not going to work. The more firms you have, then the market forces are eventually just going to reduce the price down. And I mean, I'm not sold here, dude. I don't agree with you on having having a monopoly and then posting like a market selling.
This is so obviously this is gonna be a debate, and this is gonna have different ideas, opinion. That's whole opinion point. Yes,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I completely agree with Manila, because for the sole reason, I mean, I think we discussed this when we were having a smoke or something the other day about the how the tile industry in Sri Lanka works. Right? We remember because the tile industry has why in Sri Lanka our bathrooms and places where usually are tiled only halfway. Have you realized that all tiled places in Sri Lanka are only tiled up to a certain level? That's because we can't fucking afford the tiles here. I mean, the tile industry is so monopolized that we can't. We decide to tile the place halfway. I mean, that's where we are at the moment, and that is what's going to happen for female sanitary napkins monopoly to a certain degree. Even like perfume manufacturing in Sri Lanka, monopoly. So tiles, definite monopoly. Until like recently, we had like a foreign entry or something like that. So all of those industries, if you take a look at it, they're freaking expensive. So that is not going to work. That is like the government, I think, also thinks along those lines, and the government finds it as an easy access thing to do. Okay, we set up a price ceiling and then everything seems to be fine. But that is not the case. I mean, we have had multiple, if not hundreds of cases where we have gone wrong and we have tried to. I mean, look at our transport sector. Our transport sector is a very good example for government monopolization. and we are screwed, right? I mean, we don't have like public transportation. Colombo, we don't have it properly. I mean, not to the extent of other countries. That is government monopolization. And then private sector, I told you about. And then whenever the government decides to do this whole, well, let's set up the price ceiling for rice, for example, even right now. As Manla said, it's going to affect the consumer because the middleman is going to somehow throw it on to either the supplier, or it is going to end up being with the consumer. And on top of that, the government adds the tax. So the consumer is going to get burdened anyway, and government monopolization and adding price ceilings are not like for a very layman's understanding. No, it's no go.
So now, in terms of now, obviously we sorry about that. My dogs are making a scene there. I don't know what's up. Anyway, so what I was going to say was now, obviously, a lot of people have already lost their jobs, and a lot of companies have actually already gone out of business, right? And that is the prevailing situation, unfortunately, at the moment. So, what difference does this make to the economy of our country and the world? Let's start with Manila.
I haven't looked at numbers, and I'm just.
No, I mean, I'm not necessarily talking about numbers. I'm just talking about, like just generally, like what you predict, what in your opinion will change when the economy kind of restarts after this pandemic is over.
Okay. So I actually think it's gonna be a deciding factor for the next at least 10 years, I would say. Right. I think some parts of Europe is still recovering from what happened in 2008. US is still not up to, its pre-2008 economic power. And in Europe mostly, like I said this before, like the interest rates are negative. There's so much more that you can, cut down and let the economy grow. It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna leave like a very strong impact on the economy, and it's gonna hit the people at the bottom of the income pyramid, at like the lower levels of things. It'll be easy for major industries to kind of bounce back, but it's going to impact your normal person, the person you meet on the road, kind of. So I'm really just pulling things out of my head right now. I haven't.
No, I mean, that's why we call ourselves. I mean, our show, the Thinking Hat. That's kind of what we do. So you're most welcome to do that.
Yes, I mean it's going to kind of place so much burden on governments in terms of kind of reducing expenditure. You really will have to go back to the drawing board, to go back to your books and kind of see what is necessary. Where can we make some savings? Who's gonna get a spending cut? Who's going to which industry? Where are we gonna find resources to direct into social safety nets or healthcare or pension subsidies? Where are we gonna find money to direct into areas that are absolutely necessary? Who's going to get a spending cut? Who's going to get a salary cut? Which industry will get less budget allocations this year? Those are the kind of things that are going to decide that are kind of going to dominate fiscal spaces in in the immediate term and also in the medium term. But it's going to be difficult to kind of bounce back.
Right. So, to me, I mean, obviously, since you're the expert here on world wars, right? So you obviously have an idea on how. I mean, haven't you been watching a lot of podcasts on world wars and shit? You have, right?
I have. That doesn't mean that I'm an
Right.
expert
No,
on
so-
wars.
No,
I'm not
my-
a Nazi. Thanks.
No, my question isn't going to be about the world wars per se, but what I was going to say was, I was going to use an example. So basically, we know how US came on top after the end of the Second World War, right? Compared to all of the countries, which I believe they achieved by selling ammunition to both parties, right? Um, so, in a similar way, do you think certain industries will come out on top, and certain industries will, like go down the drain? Is my question. And if so, what do you predict? What do you think they will be? What those changes will be?
In terms of expenditure, I don't think anyone's disposable income is going to increase anyway. So it's not about the consumer goods that we have to look upon. I think it's more towards the extravagant consumer needs that will take a hit. I think the non-essential goods per se would be the largest hit of all, including, I don't know, cars, watches, apartments. Sandhu, your industry is gonna take a hit, definitely. just saying. But yeah, I think in terms of anything that is non-essential, which means to say that after the World War, after the Great Depression, after 2008, after 1998, all of these years, if all what government does, or governments around the world does, is they go into the research mode where they go into the essential, they look into the essential items, they increase the production, and then once the economy, the balance sheets, everything bounces back, then they look into the non-essential goods and services. So that will be the turning point at the moment. And when I say turning point at the moment is because digitalization has come so far, right? And that's my whole thing, because I am working for an organization in that sense. So I think I have somewhat knowledge in that area and not anything else. So has digital become an essential good in the market right now? The pandemic showed that it has. And why I say that is because everyone is working from home because of the advancements in digitalization. In a way, right? None of us can work from home unless this particular talking app existed. So governments who are taking into consideration their essential services need to take into consideration what their better exports going to be for Sri Lanka. And I said this on the previous podcast as well. I think for Sri Lanka, the IT sector is gonna be an essential service. Has to have more money put in, because we bring in 1.5 billion a year dollars, and we are to grow to 3 billion by the end of 2021, and which would happen because I don't think IT per se took a major hit as government sector, as Chaturanga explained just before, or any other sector for that matter. So yes, there is going to be essential services, but the definition of or the services that is included in the essential services will differ from government to government, how they look into things. Obviously, we need to export more tea to recover for that 50 million. Definitely, Chaturanga. But yes, so that'll be my point of view. Sandhu, what about the joblessness?
I think everything will have to evolve, if not fail, because I mean, when sort of social media and sort of online shopping came into the industry, everyone was shopping like, oh, all the shops in the high street are going to close down, but that didn't happen. Eventually, Amazon had to open sort of pop-up shops along the high street. So I think we will evolve, and sort of other needs would come up in the future that would perhaps even in the medical field, medical area, because now our focus is towards that. So, and of course, certain industries will have to take a hit, and again, will evolve with another job, and everyone will have jobs again. So it's throughout the past, it's been that way, and we've always had to deal with new industries coming in and sort of leaving. So I think it will be just one of those periods where we need to change. And also with regard to like the discussion about the World War, half the world was colonized, and then sort of independent nations was a thing after the World War. And similarly, we will sort of come completely differently, and we might not be able to even imagine at the moment how the world geography would look like at the end of this. I mean, for example, what if UK, Germany, and US takes a bigger hit through coronavirus than China and Russia at the moment? I mean, that's what it looks like at the moment. And then what happens to sort of geopolitics? And I think Manuel could touch on that. So it's just, yeah. So it depends on how well we survive through this, and yeah, the powers could shift drastically.
Right, cool. So now let's move on to the fun part of this discussion. So now basically I wanted to ask you guys how different people will be once we come out of this, and like the reason behind that question was now funnily enough, a lot of people, a substantial a substantial minority of people, I should say, I've got to know have kind of like during this period of curfew have kind of like broken up, like have ended their relationships, right? Um, and I don't necessarily think it's because the social distance is kind of getting into their head, but I don't really know what the reason is, right? So I'll give you guys a very small example, right? So now we all know at least one friend who kind of goes clubbing every day, right? So now obviously he or she is not going to be able to do that now, and they're not going to be doing that. Sorry, Chaturang. You will not be able to do that for a long period of time,
I
unfortunately.
wish I had money to do that, Masan. I wish I had money to go out every day.
So now once, like, hopefully when this all ends soon, now let's say the clubs open up again, right? Obviously it's going to be flooded with people, right? And do you think this is going to be a cause for concern? And how do you think people are handling their relationships at the moment with the whole social distancing? And how different do you think people's mindsets are going to be when we come out of this? So I'll direct this question at Sandhu first. Sandhu, what's your opinion on?
Well, we tend to see sort of a very sort of innocent, vulnerable side of people at the moment, where like even in Sri Lanka, people are sort of trying to sort of volunteer and donate, and sort of people are approaching this in a very sort of innocent ways. And throughout history, power has come into play through sort of discrimination, or sort of tearing the population up into pieces and then making them fight each other. And but also this is a time where national solidarity or everyone working together is very important. And because coronavirus affects people, like despite of their sort of differences in ethnicity, religion, and sort of social income, and well, the income could affect, but sort of racial issues and all of that. People, I think, are in touch of the more human side of it. People do feel that we are not so different, and whether it's in Italy or Israel or Sri Lanka, we are all vulnerable to this one thing that is not equally, and that could get in touch, get ourselves, encourage people to, keep sort of give less priority to those differences, I think. But yeah, it depends on how far that remains. I think I will
Okay,
hear.
okay. So let me put it this way, right? This is how I see it, and I could be way off like all this. So just correct me if I'm wrong. This is how I see it. So the way I see it is basically picture a dam, right? And I just picture a dam that's obvious, that has a lot of water in it, that's been blocked by a certain levee, right? And then, in my opinion, once this period of curfew lifts, when we come out of this whole pandemic, I see it as the levy kind of opening up, and then the entire village or whatever just be flooded with water, right? In terms of certain things, not everything, right? And I kind of see this happening with like human contact, right? So just take that example of the club that I just brought in, right? So now my concern is okay now. So the moment certain clubs open up, it's just gonna be crowded like crazy, right? People miss this shit. People miss having fun. Right? People miss having a good time, right? So what I'm saying is okay. So curfew lifts, clubs open, condom sales go up, and then drug sales go up, right? So am I way off to think that, or like I'm kind of concerned that okay, so Corona is gonna go down and HIV is gonna come back up, right? So like, don't you think that people should be kind of like you never know, right? Like people, we are like we discussed earlier in terms of working from home
Why
and
are you
how we are
paranoid?
like a no, I'm just weighing my options. I'm just weighing everyone's options here, right? Like, I mean, people have different mindsets, and like history has been, like if anything, history has always kind of surprised us. So we don't know what things are going to be when we come out of this, right?
Exactly, like
Especially
it
in
has
terms of
always
something
surprised
very
us.
sensitive. Yeah, especially in terms of something very sensitive like human interaction, which is something people crave. Obviously, no one's going to deny it, right? So that's my opinion. So like I think there's gonna be. I hope this is not the case. I hope people still maintain their sanity, their their proper mindset, and like they go easy on like when the levy breaks. But what do you guys think? Like how crazy is it gonna be? How crazy is the world gonna be after in a post-corona world, basically?
I think everything's a possibility because it all depends on which says sort of the better story. Like throughout history, people have been doing all these mass movements, believing in sort of one truth altogether. Just because we believe in that one thing, it becomes a reality. It becomes an imagined reality. So in that case, it's all possibility. So if the sort of media and government and everything sort of pushes you to that edge. Probably people could go that way. Or it's basically, as I believe, how great a story is told and how well we believe. We are told that this is a time to sort of calm down and think of yourself and self care, well, as a privilege, then that's how it's going to be. Or if we are all drawn into this madness, then that's the ending. So there is no sort of predetermined sort of future. I think it's all just a possibility and depends on how well our attitudes are sort of messed around with.
Right.
Um,
So
can I just
Maya,
add
anything to
one
add?
thing?
Yeah.
I think we are all bringing in such a upper middle class or upper class perspective into this topic, guys. I mean, it's just glaringly obvious where our priorities are and what we are focusing on, and we're actually leaving a major percentage, a proportion of Sri Lanka's population, world population, out of this particular question, right? I mean, for you and me, maybe the priority would be, go out, grab a pizza, go to McDonald's, get your MacBook, I don't know what, Big Mac, or just go to what, I don't know, to your favorite club on a Friday night, grab a beer with your buddies, and just dance the night off once this whole madness is over. But I mean, literally think how many of us can afford to even think about that? You and I can. Because I don't have to worry about having food on the table for my family at the end of the day, right? I don't have to worry about finding a hire so I can, buy, keep, like, maybe get like a packet of milk to feed my kid. So it's going to be chaotic, and we're just, I mean, we're discussing this as if it's going to be, come back to normal in like what, 2-3 weeks. No, it's not.
Yeah, exactly. If we
It's not.
become the victim of consumerism again, then we are gonna go. If media's told us like we've been holding our sort of desires for this long, and this is the time, seize the moment. If that's the mentality shown by media, especially, that's the new fascism, right?
I
So
mean, the media would always focus on, sorry, Chaturanga, clickbaits here, and just
Chaturanga is taking notes.
I'm sorry, but just putting it out there. I mean, you're just gonna see the glossy side of things, right? But just imagine. I mean, I don't know if this is true, and I sincerely hope it's not. I saw a picture circulating on Twitter just a couple of days ago. How plantation workers still go to work, and how they've been asked to like maintain social distance while plucking tea leaves. Like, honestly, how important is your tea that somebody has to put their life at risk to go and pluck tea leaves when it's been so obvious that you need to be staying at home? And also staying at home is like one, but it's a privilege. It depends on how much space you have, how to what extent you can kind of distance yourself from the rest of the population or your society or like the community you're living in. It depends on how much you have at the end of the day in terms of money, right? And it also kind of comes, I think it will also kind of come down to what matters and what doesn't matter, right? I mean, to what extent you're willing to go to keep your sanity, right? In terms of like, human relationships, it kind of will boil down to compatibility, something that we kind of overlook now, right? I mean, you don't really focus on compatibility, but you just, focus on, does this look good on my Instagram feed? Does this look good on my social media? Or to what extent can I boast about this? It just doesn't come down to compatibility, but it's all about glamour right now. I mean, the way we approach things in life has changed so much, and it's bizarre. It's mind boggling. And I think right now, this whole, the fact that we've been given an opportunity to slow down and reflect back kind of make you realize what matters and what doesn't matter. It's just
Right. So, Chaturanga, before I get your opinion on this, let me just give my opinion on something very similar to what we are talking at the moment, right? So, I think it'll kind of come down to the basics. And if we talk about the basics, since the beginning of time, for any living organism, whether it's a virus, whether it's a human being, or whether it's a dog or a cat or whatever it is, it always comes down to two things, right? And those two things are survival and replication, right? So I mean, although we have other interests and other needs besides that, those definitely are basics, right? That's basic biology, and like it's not just for us; it's for everybody, right? So we might want a fancy, I don't know, wristwatch or a fancy phone or whatever it is, but there's a majority of people who still require these basics, right? Who don't think like we do and who just go for food or sex, right? Which is basically survival and replication, right? So basically, think of anything that you have done in your life so far, right? Speaking to all of us, right? Everything you have done in your life so far falls into one of those two categories. It's either for survival or for replication, right? Let's say you bought a car, that applies to both, right? You wanted to show off, get a girl, you bought a car, or you wanted to travel, survive, right? So everything you have done in your life so far either falls into one of the categories or both, right? So what I'm saying is basically it's gonna come down to those, like for a majority of people, like around the world, it's gonna come down to those two basic needs, and it's going to be slightly chaotic if people are not informed on how to handle this situation. I know I'm just I'm not saying this is how the entire world is going to be, right? There are people who are well educated, there are people who are in control of their urges, and who have different needs as well, right? So I'm not saying it's going to be everyone, but I'm saying there's going to be a number of people who are going to, want food and sex, because those are the basic two things, right? Survival and replication. So having said that, obviously now in terms of how people are going to come out of this, it doesn't just apply to relationships. It applies to our own peace of mind as well, and how we are going to cope with this new world per se, right? Coming out of social distancing. So, Chaturang, let me put this question to you. How different will people's mindset be in the new post-corona world?
I think people will like sort of talk about it for a week, and then once like busyness starts kicking in,
2 weeks. 2 weeks.
yeah, probably like 2 weeks, and then once like I mean, there's a backlog of things. Like, okay, there is a certain amount of work that you can do from home, and then obviously the rest of the work will remain at work for you to finish. So once the busyness sort of kicks in, I think people will sort of forget all this whatever we have been doing for the past 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, as Domi said, and then just get by doing whatever we do. Like, we'll live our life. I feel. I mean, I mean, how many things have we seen, right, in life? In this 20 to 25 to 30 years that we have lived. So, I mean, I think people will just bounce back.
No, for sure. People will. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure. I mean, we, especially Sri Lankans, we forget soon, right? That's what we are popular for, forgetting things soon.
And also, because of the economy, and we'll be stuck in a major economic crisis. We won't have the leisure sort of or the luxury of being able to think outside that, or think of anything philosophical or anything beyond that. It always has been in the past where sort of the developed countries set a new way of working or sort of new philosophy that they follow, and it just sort of trickles down because of the sort of Eurocentric mindset that we have, because they have the leisure and the luxury of thinking beyond how to get food on my table, and yeah, so that's going to affect the mindset and sort of the luxury of being able to care about your mental health.
So, Dumi, other than growing a beard, what do you think will be different?
For me, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I do this on a daily basis, and I keep on doing everything on a daily basis. Absolutely nothing is going to change for me. But yeah, I guess it's different from person to person. Either you come out of this whole quarantine period learning a new thing. It's up to you. Either you are going to adhere to whatever you learned or use what you learned is up to you. Also, it's just another, for me, it's not just another thing that happened in our lifetime, right? So it's not going to change who we are inside. It's not going to change how we do things. Doesn't matter who we are, what job we do, wherever we live in the world. It's just a period where people get to spend with their family for the year, so that they don't have to buy, for Sri Lanka at least, they don't have to buy single Urdu gifts. Thank God. For everyone living across the globe, it's just another vacation that they got, paid vacation that they got, which they had good use, to spend with their families. I think that's gonna be the gist of it. In the end of the day, it's not gonna be anything beyond that, I guess. Not the AIDS pandemic, for sure.
Right. So before we wrap this up, another kind of burning question that I had was, how do we define what the essential services are at the moment? Like, for example, now, Chaturanga, obviously now you guys have to go to work. So when you guys do that, do you guys have some precautions that you all take? And if so, like, what are they? And also, that's the first part of the question. Second part is like, now, basically, Manan said that, for example, in tea plantation, still people are being forced to work, right? Maybe not forced, but people have been told to work. I don't know how it is. But so how do we define what is essential and what is not? Now, for example, now, very recently, the Cardinal had a prayer service in Devat church. So there must have been at least 10 to 15 people there, probably more. Right, so what makes them special over the others who are adhering to the curfew? So how do we define essential services? But my question.
So there's a gazette that has been issued by the government. The government gets to decide what is essential and what is not. And in terms of where,
I'm asking, your opinion.
Yeah, so in terms of what you say is right. I mean, no one is special over this incident. Like, no, it's go without getting the disease, or they're not like immune to it or something until we find someone who is. But the whole thing is, but certain things have to happen, right? I mean, you can't. I mean, like for example, the police at the moment, they are checking hundreds and hundreds of people on a daily basis. They take the same. They probably, like a lot of them I met are not wearing gloves. They take a wallet or whatever. If we like, my ID is like put like fixed onto the wallet. So if I give the wallet, they take the wallet into their hand. They read it. They bring it close to their face, and they read it and they give it back to me. They probably do it to hundreds and hundreds of people. I mean, I could be corona infected. I could have coughed on my wallet for all they care, and they could be transmitting it to whoever they check. I mean that. So certain things we are being very like lackadays. We are being very lazy about certain things in those departments. But the world over, certain things that we do, the world does it better. So we should learn from the world at least. And in terms of your particular question, I mean, yes, you can lock the damn place down, but there are certain, like, what do we eat, right? How do we know stuff? Who's gonna check whether people are engaged in like illegal activities and stuff like? So certain things have to happen, and in those certain things that need to happen, spirituality is also one of it. I mean, Buddhist people should feel spiritually connected. I mean, this is a difficult time. Not a lot of people have this experience, the experience of being in a lockdown. So people need that spiritual connection as well. So people like the Mahanayaka Theras, the cardinal, Islam religious leader, or a Hindu religious leader, or whatever the other religions that are available in Sri Lanka. Those religious leaders have to step in and do their part. Whether they'll get sick or whether they'll get the coronavirus, I mean, they have to really then weigh themselves as to where they stand, whether their balance is to live or to carry out their spiritual duty. So that's a different debate. But in terms of those things, they have to happen. I mean, there is no choice. That's what I believe.
Or maybe they can evolve, like to do in a different way, like carry out the same spiritual, like sort of guidance through different ways that suit the context. Yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, what's essential could be subjective as well in a way if you think too much about it. Yeah, it's a very philosophical question, and it'll need months of analyzing.
Cool. So I believe we touched on some important topics. So thank you, Manela and Sandhu, for joining us for this episode. I mean, definitely you guys had some interesting input, and obviously why we wanted to have you guys on board. Yeah, I guess we can wrap it up now. So any other message you guys want to give before we wrap it up, Dumi?
No, just stay safe, stay at home, eat well. Nobody is gaining from your fitness regime, so just eat eat well at home.
All right, cool. All right, thank you guys. Let's wrap it up then. All right, see you.
All right, thanks, guys. Stay safe, everyone.
See you. It was that. Hopefully we got all of them, right? What? I think.
Aduh.